Hi folks, hope you're okay today. It's good to be with you. I just want to read an extract from Wittgenstein's Tractatus, chapter 4, verse 112. It says, philosophical propositions, but the clarification of propositions, philosophy should take thoughts that are otherwise turbid and blurred, so to speak, and make them clear and sharp. So Wittgenstein basically believed that philosophy is to define words. No, it's not. That's only part of philosophy's job. Philosophy's job is also to come up with some answers. It can't seem to do that because it's working on the finite, and the finite can't come to any complete understanding. Not only complete understanding, but can't even give us anything to do with the infinite or any absolutes. So the finite's always going to be swimming around, never reaching the infinite. So in other words, language is always going to be limited. So the job of philosophy is not just to define, it is to give us answers. But it can't give us answers because it's limited. But it should try. That's why we need theology, because theology gives us the connection with the infinite and can answer the big questions. Philosophy can point to those big questions, can say something about the big questions, but ultimately it has to confer to theology, because theology is in contact with the infinite, whereas philosophy is not able to get into the realm of the infinite. So we'll always be limited at the finite level. So Tractatus does not, in my view, state what philosophy truly is. It is limited, but it is not limited just to the analysis of language. It is incumbent on philosophy to try and answer the big questions. It will not be able to do so fully. It will have to defer and work alongside theology. Thank you for listening and take care. Ludwig Wittgenstein. Basically, Ludwig Wittgenstein believed that the self was not actually a subject, that language was the referent of the self, but there was no actual subject of the self. So when I am reflecting about myself, the I, there is no I. There is language, but there is no I. I would say this is intellectual suicide because it does not have what I would call ontological status. That's where Christianity comes in. Christianity provides philosophical reflection with ontological status. Now, I'm not going to unpack that. You've got to type in ontological and do the working out of what I'm trying to say. But what you'll find what I'm trying to say is much more profound than Wittgenstein and much more logically coherent. Thank you for listening and take care. I just want to say that in the early work of Ludwig Wittgenstein, he believed that there was no such thing as causality, that it was an illusion. But he did talk about logical necessity. But here's the question: how can you have logical necessity if you think that causality is an illusion? It seems illogical and contradictory. What do you think? Hi folks, we're looking at Ludwig Wittgenstein and happiness. Because Ludwig Wittgenstein, in his earlier work anyway, believed that there was no self, then what is the point of talking about happiness if there is no self? It's just words that refer to a self, but self is not an object. It seems to be that we are in an ontological Go system where there, like I said, there is no self. In the Bible, Paul says, rejoice in the Lord, and again I say rejoice. You see, the Bible talks about God, ontologically speaking, is there. That means being is there with God, and that God created human beings, and there is being there. There is a real being. So you really do get upset, you really do get sad. So if Ludwig Wittgenstein didn't believe in the self, if someone dropped a lump hammer on his foot, according to his logic, when he starts screaming, there is no self. But obviously, when he starts screaming, as the lump hammer hits his foot, he will soon know that he has a self. This is an abject lesson in the absurdity of philosophy when it's not done in line with the Word of God. In earlier work in the Tractatus, Wittgenstein believed that ethics was in the transcendental realm, that is to say that we can't say really anything about it or really understand what it's all about. But in order for him to say that, he had to write that in his Tractatus, which means that we understood that we cannot understand, but yet we had to understand in order to know that we couldn't understand. So when in Wittgenstein's work, in his early work, when he says we cannot understand ethics, it transcends us, we had to read his work in order to understand, which would be contradictory to what he was saying, that we can't understand. What that shows you is there is always truth, and truth should make you realize that there has to be a truth giver. Because once you start playing the we don't know and we can't know game or card, the kind of what I would call the Kantian dance, you never get out of the problem that you always end up with some kind of absolute truth. So if you say we cannot know anything absolutely, you've made an absolute claim. If you say there is no absolute moral standard, you've made an absolute moral statement. So you can never, what I would call, get out of the transcendental situation. You can never get out of the what I would call Kantian dance. Basically, there is truth, and if there is truth, who gave the truth? That's the question you have to ask. As Ludwig Wittgenstein finished the Tractatus, he felt that he solved the problems of philosophy. He went and fell in love with, I think it's a Swiss girl called Margarita, and she was not into philosophy, and she was vivacious and young, and a lot younger than him, but Ludwig Wittgenstein didn't seem to be interested in her as much because he was praying. I find that very interesting, that he goes from this, what I would call philosophy, that is really got some helpful things, analysing words, but there's more things to it than that, where he's now involved in religious exercise of prayer. Here's a question: how many philosophers out there actually pray? Let us know. And to who do you pray, and why do you pray? If there's any philosophers out there, let us know. Hi folks, hope you're okay today. I want to talk about two things about Wittgenstein. One is about his friend Antonio Gramsci, a Marxist who kind of challenged Wittgenstein to think in a different direction, making him realise that his philosophical work wasn't done. And it always shows you that no matter how much you progress in any discipline, you always need colleagues to challenge you and push you and to make you think anew. We have never arrived and never will arrive at all the answers, and we need other people to shake us up and show us that's the case. The second thing is the Vienna Circle. In 1927, Wittgenstein began to meet at the Vienna Circle, mathematicians, scientists led by Moritz Schlick, 1882 to 1936, were involved in this Vienna Circle. But the thing is, the Vienna Circle believed that Wittgenstein's work, his Tractatus, was about philosophy and science, and Wittgenstein had to say no, it's not about philosophy and science, it's about the limitations of language, especially in the area of ethics. What that shows you is how even your own colleagues can misunderstand, even your own contemporaries can misunderstand your work, whether it be theologically or philosophically. And so therefore it's important, whenever you're writing an essay, whether you're writing a book, to write with the absolute clarity. Simplicity of style is always the best way to be a writer and to express your ideas. Okay, today I just want to read Rudolf Carnap, a distinguished philosopher from 1891 to 1970 of the Vienna Circle, said this about Wittgenstein. His point of view and his attitude towards people and problems, even theoretical problems, were much more similar to those of a creative artist than to those of a scientist. One might almost say similar to those of a religious prophet or seer. When he started to formulate his view on some specific philosophical problem, we often felt the internal struggle that occurred in him at the very moment, a struggle by which he tried to penetrate from darkness to light under an intense and painful strain, which was even visible on his most expressive face. When finally, sometimes after a prolonged, arduous effort, his answer came forth, his statement stood before us like a newly created piece of art or a divine revelation. Not that he asserted his views dogmatically, but the impression he made on us was of an insight came to him as through a divine inspiration, so that we could not help feeling that any sober rational comment or analysis of it would be a profanation. What I think is interesting is that we have to realize that when we're thinking in logic or science or any other way of thinking, there's always a creative element in thinking. And a lot of people, especially the rationalists and the skeptics and the atheists, fail to realize that there is creativity in thinking. And it's a great joy to have creativity in philosophy, creativity in logic. There are intuitive thoughts that go behind logic and reason, that open up new ideas. Many of the great scientific discoveries were not just based on pure logic, but also on creativity, people having the imagination to stretch their thinking to a point which went beyond our experience. I just want to address who was Wittgenstein. I've got a lot of notes here. He was a person who students flocked to. They imitated him quite a lot. He liked reading American detective stories. He had a deep respect for, even though he did pray, he wasn't too deeply religious, but he had respect for Augustine, Kierkegaard and the Bible. The attitude of your spirit was important. It wasn't what you did, it was how you did it. But he did believe that knowledge, how we know, the most important thing is what we do. He was a designer. He could sculpt, he could conduct an orchestra. He had engineering ability. Music such as Bach, Beethoven, Schubert, Schumann were important to him. He had no desire for modern music. He was a gloomy kind of person. He didn't really like the academic life. He shunned the public, really. He thought his age, of his time, was a dark age, and he was not too impressed with the mantra of progress. So those are some of the things about Ludwig Wittgenstein that you would have liked to have known. We're looking at Wittgenstein's work, and then things changed after the Tractatus. He wrote philosophical investigations. And basically now he changes his attitude and says that philosophy is like a therapy, and that there are many types of therapies because there are many types of individuals who are asking philosophical questions. And basically what we have to do is use our own particular method as some kind of philosophical therapy to break open the kind of various attitudes, traps that we've engendered ourselves through the development of our language. So our language kind of is the problem, and the language is binding us and not allowing us to be free. So what we need to do is untangle that language with a therapeutic kind of philosophy, which is basically using your questions to untangle the issues that you've entangled yourself in the cultural language that you are based in. Jesus would say that we're set free by his atonement. Wittgenstein at this point, he said, we're set free by untangling ourselves from the entanglement of language by using the therapy of our own questions to get out of the problem.